then we put band tension. There's bands that we put on the bar. The whole reason we put bands on the bar is so it's attacking the nervous system. It's trying to increase that rate of force development that we were talking about earlier, okay? The bands almost like trigger the brain. I got to drive through a force from the ground a little bit more explosively. Anyway, long story short, band tension also adds weight to the bar. So at the top of the movement, the bands obviously it gets harder as it goes up. The bands, so yeah, at the top, and we can measure how much band tension is on there. It was close to 950 pounds when those two were doing it there at the end of summer. So that's what they're talking about.
Is that normal to see something like that?
Absolutely not. J.C. Latham's the only other one we've had come close to that. J.C. Latham was a freak of nature too. But those two guys are special. They're physically special. But as I said before, and I told these guys, and I hope you guys put it out there, unless you do it on a football field, it doesn't matter. And that's been the charge to them. This has got to transfer to the field, play after play, rep after rep. You got to be able to replicate it. And that's been the number one thing we're trying to hammer on, and that's an important part because it's in there. It's in there. God bless them, and they have a great work ethic, and they're good dudes. But you got to be able to do it. You got to produce on the field, and you show it on the football field. And that's the thing. With the mentality too.
What have you seen out of James this offseason?
James had a phenomenal offseason, A+. If I was like grading our roster from off-season production, James Smith would be in the top 5. And not even so much. The physical numbers certainly have been great. He's body composition. He's put on 9 pounds of lean mass. But it's outside. It's the mentality, the consistency, the maturity that he's kind of, and just the intentionality he's come with the training. I couldn't be more happy with where he's at right now, mentality-wise, not just physical, but mentality-wise. And I really hope this kid plays like what I just saw from January to July. I hope he plays that way. And I just told him that before we started practice.
Mentality of the team. Tell me about this offseason, what you saw, what's different.
Yeah, I think the offseason, these guys, they got challenged. They got challenged in a lot of ways, but they were challenged on a day-to-day basis to where, things that happened last year that we weren't okay with, that we don't sleep well with. The only way to change that is not by words, it's by action. Consistent action. We always talk about the standard around here. Well, you got to be held accountable to that standard, and you got to be okay when you aren't being held accountable to the standard. And you got to be coachable, and you got to be able to take it, and you got to be able to walk in those shoes and deal with tough stuff and deal with tough conversations and step back in the mirror and have a little self-reflection. And we were pretty aggressive in that, and there were confrontations, many of them, and some of those were much needed, and I think some of those made us better. And the confrontation between coaches and players to players, and teammate to teammate. Well, the best part, there was two good indicators that told me where we're at. We basically start the off season. This is how we're going to do things. If you don't want to be here, leave. And nobody left. But the other part was the teammate to teammate, confrontations that happen, trying to hold guys in the standard, was how those is much about the player development part, how you're going to, develop them as an athlete, how you're going to maximize genetic potential. So in our role in this is it's an education piece to the parents and the player. And we're fortunate here that the administration has invested a lot of money to the facilities here. We got a lot of really cool things and a lot of people have, and we're able to do things that honestly some people can't, don't have the staff to do it or the technology. So you see a very receptive, your parents, the recruiting parents and the recruits themselves, you see a very receptive and very positive reaction, almost 100% of the time, to be honest with you. And but I think once they get in here and see it, it's like, oh wow, it opens up another part of their whole thought process into what development should look like.
You may have to help me work through this question, but when you look at depth, how does that make your job harder in a camp when you know that you got to get game ready, but you've also got to protect the injuries?
Yeah, I think it all has to come down to volume control and look, through the first part of training camp is going to be hard, and it needs to be hard, and they need to be. We talk about tissue resilience and resiliency and almost callous in the body to be able to handle the season. All that is what we do in the off season, but then it becomes fun time to play football, where you're playing football 2.5 hours, almost 3 hours of practice. You can't replicate that in the weight room. You got to go play. So that means the first part of training camp, you got to go hard in the body. You got to get out there and beat on each other, and you got to go do some hard work. Can't be afraid to push guys. Okay, but the back part of that, you do. That's why we have the GPS, the catapult, that tracks, player load, the high explosive yardage, and their overall workload, all that stuff. There's many categories that we'll look at, and you'll go manage guys from here to there. But I'll tell you what, the way our coaches set up practice and the way they rotate players and you know, as many guys that get reps in practice, it makes it a little easier because you don't see a whole lot. Like we were going over data this morning, you don't see a whole lot of guys that are overwhelmed, and you got to talk to the player too, physically where they're at. And our guys right now, we're sitting in a weekend, and I don't know how many practices we've had yet, but they feel great, they feel fresh, and they're out there playing fast yesterday, being physical. We had 2 physical days in a row. But there's a sports science piece where you got to keep on top of it, but there's another piece where they got to grind. They got to grind through stuff. They got to grind through hard stuff.
How rewarding is it, though, when you look at the strength conditioning numbers and you're running the data, as you said, and you go to a number and you're just like, oh, this is really impressive.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of cool. It's cool for us as a staff, but also the player, because we post everything. When whatever happens in the weight room from a power perspective, there's a leaderboard, they're ranked by position, it's up on the live screens as we're lifting, and it's up day to day on the TV screens through passing periods when they're going through the building. They know they'll look at it. And so there's an accountability piece to it for sure, but it is really cool when you see a guy PR, and our guys around here all talk about power numbers. We rarely talk about pounds on the bar, it's all power numbers. So when they get a power PR, our guys are pretty jacked, and usually the whole room will know because they see it on the screen, and they can tell when a guy's PR. So it is fun, it is cool, and it's you know they get to see a product of their hard work and consistency more than anything.
Who are like the strongest guys on the team on that leaderboard?
I mean, if you were going pound for pound, which is probably the fair way to do it,
right.
Pound for pound, Quay, Russo is definitely one. And look, J-Rob and Proctor, no matter pound for pound or nothing, they're just strong human beings, and Parker too. But Quay's definitely would be up there. Jan Miller would be up there, no doubt about it. Some of our DBs are pretty damn impressive too. But those guys are probably the first ones to come off top of them. Tim Keenan's strong. Tim Keenan, really strong kid.
Gotcha. Who have been some of the newcomers that have really impressed you, like just coming into the weight room and going into the Alabama coach
in the weight room?
Yeah.
You know, I've been impressed in terms of off-season. Jeremiah Beeman has done a good job. We talked about James Smith earlier. He's not necessarily a newcomer, but he's still a younger type guy. Right. He's been phenomenal. You know, the new group of freshmen who we've had just come in with Jackson and Mike and those guys and Micah, they're hardworking dudes. They're hardworking guys, and they put a lot of effort into it. And you can tell they care about it. You know, DJ Lee special from a physical perspective. Elite, absolutely elite. Young linebackers we have, and QB Reese and those guys over there, Abdul and Caden. Those guys work their butt off. Duke Johnson works his butt off. Duke Johnson's come a long way, adding lean mass on his body. But I can go on and on with these dudes. Like, you're talking about JJ, Justin Jefferson, 22-mile-an-hour linebacker. You don't see that every day. He weighs 226 pounds. Like, JJ can run with DBs, So there's a lot of cool things we get to see on a day-to-day basis that happen. And like you said, the numbers-wise, you're like, wow, yeah, that's not normal.
And you said Rico was the fastest, I believe, 23.5 miles. Is there anyone?
Rico actually hit 23.4, and he hit it multiple times this summer.
Right.
Yeah. We don't count it unless they hit it multiple times. We don't count it.
Right.
Yeah.
Who else is kind of in that area of like the fastest guys on the team?
We've got a couple of guys, Ryan and Rico, or Ryan and Lashir, both around 23 miles an hour. Isaiah and Germ. Those guys are little over 22 miles an hour. All those DBs. I mean, you can go through all those DBs, 22 miles an hour guys. Damani, DJ, all those dudes over there. Cam. There's Xavier. There's a pretty special group.
So what is the point of emphasis of speed? Because I know Dr. Ray, I read some of his peer-reviewed journals. He obviously was a lot of speed. You still have a lot of that implemented into the program?
Well, we do. Well, our system in general, which I've had all the way back to 2015 when I was at IMG, we have a part of our every lower body workout we do. It's called Speed Focus. Okay, and I could get long-winded, and there could be a lot of depth into it. But long story short, we EMG our guys when they're sprinting. Okay, and when EMG when they're sprinting, we can tell muscle activation coordination patterns we're looking at. Okay, quad to hamstring, the sequencing of the two when they get to top speed. It tells us a lot of things. It tells us how much speed they got left in their body, but it also tells us soft tissue injury risk. Okay, and from that we'll tag them. They got certain tags that they'll get. Okay, which means there's specific exercises they'll do to fix their issues. Individualized. It's very individualized in the way we do our lower body work here. Okay. Which is cool. Why they guys love it. They love it. They're bought into it because they know they're doing things to help fix their body. But over time, in that speed focus that we're talking about, they'll be doing things, those exercises, specific exercises, to help fix those issues. And some of that is sprinting. We got 1080 sprints with basically like electronic sled that we use. We got the 1080 series quantums and the synchros you see right in the room. You're able to give specific stimulus for the nervous system to attack whatever issues they do have. There's many of them. There's about 16 things we'll take them through from ground up to try to find deficiencies, flaws, weaknesses, issues that they have. And then we go to work. We individualize and go to work, and then you got to make adjustments. Like we've seen the nervous system every about 4 or 5 weeks, so it'll start making changes. Then you got to stay on top of it. And then you got to make adjustments volume-wise and exercises and all that thing. That's why you got to have a really good staff. And you got to have an analytical staff that will spend time into the data and be able to be ready to make the adjustments. And we've been fortunate here. We got a lot of guys who've been staff-wise, have a lot of guys who've been in the system, know the adjustments, know how to make them quick, and that's part of the magic.